Does cybersecurity seem like a terrifying topic? Well, have no fear. This episode is sponsored by RoundTable Technology, the nonprofit IT partner. For the 8th year in a row, they are offering a free webinar to teach you and your staff exactly the steps to make your IT more secure in the new year. Head over to nonprofitit.com/best-ever to save your seat. RoundTable Technology is a managed IT and cybersecurity services organization focusing almost exclusively on the nonprofit sector with over 200 nonprofit clients. So make it your New Year's resolution to get your entire staff free cybersecurity awareness training. Go to nonprofitit.com/best-ever to save your seat now. And here's to a wonderful 2024. Hello, and welcome to Nonprofit Nation. I'm your host, Julia Campbell, and I'm going to sit down with nonprofit industry experts, fundraisers, marketers, and everyone in between to get real and discuss what it takes to build that movement that you've been dreaming of. I created the Nonprofit Nation podcast to share practical wisdom and strategies to help you confidently find your voice, definitively grow your audience, and effectively build your movement. If you're a nonprofit newbie or an experienced professional who's looking to get more visibility, reach more people, and create even more impact, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back or welcome to Nonprofit Nation. If you're here for the very first time or if you're here for the 100th time, 200th time, thank you so much for joining me. The topic that we are going to discuss today, why you need an AI, artificial intelligence use policy, and how to make one. But we're going to talk a lot about what is artificial intelligence, the tools that we are using right now, and why we need to be paying attention. What are the risks and benefits of not paying attention? We're going to cover a lot of different topics today. And my guest is Kim Snyder. And Kim's the VP of Data Strategy at RoundTable Technology. And she's going to lead us in this discussion of the specifics of ethics, privacy, AI use cases, and how it relates to nonprofits. I do want to mention RoundTable Technology is the sponsor for this episode and for the entire month of January. And they're leading their signature free webinar on cybersecurity. And you can go to roundtabletechnology.com/best-ever to sign up for this free webinar. I will put it in the show notes and I'll be doing a lot of promotion around it as well. So RoundTable Technology is dedicated to creating a roadmap for companies to succeed with technology. And Kim fits right in with over 20 years of experience with data systems, business analysis, and change management, not to mention accolades as an agile coach, a certified PMP project management professional, and an agile certified professional. And Kim's true passion lies in empowering nonprofit professionals to navigate the complex and ever-changing landscape of data and technology in the workplace. And I think this is so important because in everything that I do, it is all about empowerment. It's all about education. It's about increasing the clarity and confidence of nonprofit professionals. So we are not going to try to overwhelm you today. We're going to talk about AI, artificial intelligence, which is certainly a very hot topic in nonprofit circles. It's causing a lot of excitement, a lot of skepticism. You don't need to be a tech guru to get a lot out of this discussion. So I think, Kim, I want to start with this, and certainly we can pivot into any area where you want to start. But what do we mean by artificial intelligence, and why should we be paying attention? What's all the fuss about?
Okay, well, AI or artificial intelligence has many meanings, okay? And some will say that it doesn't mean anything because it has so many meanings. But
like the internet.
Yes. Or, well, I mean, it's the algorithms that power social media. It's many things, artificial intelligence. It's the GPS on my phone. It's all of these things. But there's a specific type of AI that I think has burst onto the scene. I think it was November 2022. And that has been really what's been the game changer, I think, for a lot of nonprofits. It's really heightened awareness of AI as a potential tool. And that's really when ChatGPT came on the scene. There were already some tools that organizations were using, but it was really few and far between. Then it was more really the exception. And I think the tools felt a lot less accessible to people. But all of a sudden, here's this chat thing that we can ask questions of, and it will say something back to us. And that's pretty amazing. And so that is really why it's become such a big topic. So I'm not really, when we think about ethics and AI and, policies around the use of AI, we're not really today going to be delving into, I'd say, like very kind of complex machine learning or an organization that might be building some kind of custom, AI tool. Really thinking about generative AI because it's so ubiquitous right now. It's so everywhere and it's in the news and, everyone's using it. So when I say generative AI, as opposed to the other kinds of AI, I'm really talking about the AI that people use to make things. Often that's text through something like ChatGPT, but also more frequently it's, pictures, video,
images, right.
Translations, etc., things like that.
Right. Yes. Those tools are taking over the headlines for sure. I know most of us have probably heard of ChatGPT. I do know a lot of nonprofit professionals are very new to this conversation. There's Bing, there's Bard, there's Dolly, there's any number of tools. And I think what's so interesting is when we were talking earlier, you were mentioning how you really want nonprofits to feel prepared to use these tools. So sort of what are some things that we need to think about when we're getting prepared?
When I think of preparation for using AI tools, I'm really thinking about nonprofit organizations thinking about the use cases and getting ready to roll out this kind of tool. Okay, so what I'd venture to guess is a lot of people listening may have tried ChatGPT. Some may be using it every day, all the time. Some others may occasionally kind of dip their toe in and see what are these tools about. But I would venture to say that in pretty much any nonprofit today, people are using these tools, whether or not it's an officially sanctioned tool for use in your organization. I would venture because it's so accessible. I mean, besides for being in the news all the time, they're also easy to get. There are many free tools out there. Bing Chat, for example, is free. GPT-4 for free. It also makes pictures, things like that. So it's right there for people to use. So my guess is that people are using these tools, right? And I've talked to some people in various conferences and things and heard, well, I don't really want to kind of deal with this. I don't want to take this on. Our organization kind of shouldn't be using this. And okay, that's one way to think about it. And we will get back to that later because I think there's some risk in that kind of thinking. I also want to address the fact that whether or not you want, it's not going anywhere, right? This is not a fad. This isn't even like cryptocurrency or whatever. Although that's back too, but it's not going away. I really liken AI, okay, and this is why readiness is important. I liken AI and this new kind of resource as being at the scale of like the internet being introduced. And so in 1990, if I said, well, it could be a bunch of junk out there, and I don't really, we don't need to have a website, right? And you think about today and where we are. I think it's more significant than social media. I think it's as fundamental as something like the internet in terms of its ability, like changing the way we do our work. So I think that you kind of can't get away with saying, well, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to address this. And we're not going to have a policy on it. We're not going to have a position on using this kind of tool. And also put you at a disadvantage.
Can you talk about the like exponential growth in context of AI? Because you'd mentioned that to me. And this is a term I've heard before, but I'm certainly not an expert.
This kind of helps explain why so much so fast. And that's another reason why we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Right.
All right. As I said earlier, AI has been around for a while. And, I think the types of generative AI that we're seeing today got their roots in like the 1980s with handwriting analysis of zip codes. Actually, that's where this stuff started. And since that time, I think that was 1989, but since the 90s and the 2000s, what we've seen is kind of an incredible growth in capability in terms of handwriting analysis, then image recognition, then, reading comprehension, then these different kinds of skills that were able to be kind of processed by machines, right? Some of this is the availability of data, but it's also coupled with incredible power in computing power, right? So you have all of these things coming together, and it's an exponential growth path, right? So for a long time it was going along, we didn't really notice it, and then all of a sudden, boom, it starts to be everywhere. And that's where we are now. The growth is not slowing down, which I know is one of the things that makes people maybe feel like, wow, this is too risky. Like, I don't know if we want to go here because this stuff is just moving too far, too fast. And what's going to happen? Like, it's going to take over the world. Right. And then you hear people out there saying that kind of stuff, the sort of AI doomsdayers. Right. The people, and actually I've had some people that have really influenced my thinking on it. Dr. Fei Li from Stanford actually is one of the early innovators. Image recognition was her thing. And she talks about trying to have optimism so that more responsible people start using these tools and getting to know them. Right. And it's how we use these tools that's important.
Oh, I love that. I want to link to that in the show notes, so I will ask you to send me that
The
article.
Worlds I See. She just published the book. It came out, I think, last month. I read it, and it was really amazing.
I love that mindset. We need to have more optimism so that people are using these tools in a more positive way, and more positive people are using them for good.
Well, yeah. I mean, this year, I'll say that my colleague Joshua and I have been on overdrive teaching nonprofits in various different ways through TechSoup and other, conferences, et cetera, about using these tools. And I feel a personal passion, if you will, about bringing these tools to nonprofits because I feel like we need more human-centered people using them. I feel like nonprofit people need to feel like they can pull up a seat at the table and ask questions of these tools, because that's how we'll get it right.
Oh, it's so funny to hear you say that, because when I started teaching nonprofits how to use social media back in, I think, 2005, I had the exact same viewpoint. I said, if we don't use it for good, it's only going to be used for evil. And I wanted them to also have a seat at the table and to feel like they could be building communities and creating conversations on social media. That's so funny. I love that. Optimism. So we're optimists. That's
We're
fantastic.
optimists.
Yeah.
And then and there are more people thinking about these things. And I have a couple of books I will definitely recommend for your show notes. I would also, if we're thinking about, let's put it this way, an optimism that also weighs the risks very carefully.
Yes.
Unmasking AI by Dr. Joy Buolamwini. Amazing book. Okay. And she really deals with the topic of AI bias, right? Which is one of the risks of these tools.
Yep.
And pale male data and what happens and how do we deal with that?
Mm-hmm. What are some other sort of critical concerns or risks you've been seeing, and how can they be addressed? Or, what are some ways that we can address them if we can even begin to do that?
Okay, so again, talking about the generative AI tools, these are the tools we're using to make things, right? Text, images, video. We can do some data analysis as well. All right. Here's some, this is the kind of tool set I'm thinking about. As I said earlier, there are myriad risks and, risks around data bias and surveillance, AI that does surveillance. That is a whole other topic that I'm not jumping into. And that's entire graduate programs, okay, are kind of need to be focused on that, and people need to go there. But anyway, getting back to the kind of risk of day-to-day AI, okay, I can walk through the kind of general categories of risk. All right. The first is, it's a fancy word for making things up, but confabulation. Okay. So that is AI can sound, or ChatGPT or Bard or any of these tools can sound so convincing and smart.
And they're very confident sometimes.
And very confident and be entirely wrong. Okay. Never ask it for a quote from anyone. It'll generate the best quote you've ever heard that the person never said.
Wow.
Okay. So, right, it's a probabilistic statistics model, right? That's what AI is doing. It's math in there. It's not, there's no brain, like there's no one thinking, right? So it's not like, so it's predicting the next word. So sometimes things will come out that are completely false. People need to know that, okay? George Weiner from Whole Whale has a first, not final, keep a human in the loop. Okay, that's something he says. Okay, so great for first draft. I'm not going to send out a first draft. I'm not going to, think of it as AI as an intern, right? Or an assistant.
Yes, you would never have an intern write a first draft of your appeal letter and then not fact check it or look at it and send it out.
Yeah, so do not do that because it can be wrong. Okay, sounds great, can be wrong. And verify. Yep. So don't ask it about things that you can't verify. Okay? That you don't have some way of verifying. Like, remember that lawyer? Like, the case of the lawyer?
That he was using
he could have
cases
verified
that were fabricated and he didn't fact check it.
Just like and that was verifiable. It could check the law books, right? Find that.
Lord.
So that was like, I didn't know could lie sounded so good, right? Just like the quotes, right? They're perfect, right? Okay. So that's a biggie. Keep a human in the loop on this stuff. Review it, right? All right.
Okay.
Bias. There is bias. Even in these generative tools, right? May not present the same level of risk as if you were using it for surveillance or for automated decision making, but there's still bias that can show up. I've seen it mostly kind of around image generation and women's images, actually. It can be horrible. So know that these tools are by and large trained on the world's data, and the world's data is biased. Now, the makers of these tools, OpenAI and Anthropic and these companies are trying to do, to kind of to lessen that, the impact of kind of inherent bias, but it's still there. It is so.
These are systems, that have been in place for hundreds of years, thousands of years. So
and that's Dr. Joy Buolamwini's book is all about that, right? The the pale male data problem. Right? You have a lot of, young white
Mm-hmm.
guys developing the software. They're making the decisions about these systems.
Yeah.
That in and of itself confers a certain level of bias. So there is bias in these tools. So the thing is, when you're generating something, just be aware of that. Again, it's
Yes.
part of the review. It could make stuff up. It could make up somewhat biased stuff. Copyright, right, is another risk area.
Oh.
And I'll tell you how this one shows its face. And you hear about it a lot more with images and actually Midjourney, which is an image generation tool. They just came out with version 6, which is really pretty amazing. But I also was seeing yesterday in the news that there are some issues around copying living artists or specific artists' styles, right? Like some of these tools, you can't ask it, like, make me a Picasso, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
it's scraping data from
it's been trained on data, and I think that's where a lot of artists and writers are really taking issue around copyright. When these data sets were trained, that they're did their work get sucked up in this, right? And there are like tools where you can ask for very specific artist style, but for a living artist, like, that's not really okay to do. So I think, again, we'll talk more about policy, but that's the type of thing to weigh in on a policy, right?
And the New York Times is suing OpenAI.
Yes, for being trained on, so in another big area, and this is my other hat at RoundTable. I've kind of 3 hats that I wear all the time, but privacy and cybersecurity and AI. But privacy, right, is another big issue. What you put into your prompts is going out there. Is someone going to read it verbatim? I don't know, but it's still going out there. If I leave a bunch of personal information in the garbage at Starbucks, is somebody going to read it? No, but that's a breach of sorts, right? Because I've made data that shouldn't be available for outside eyes available. So there are some tools like ChatGPT Plus has some data analysis tools, which are really quite fantastic, right? That's the ChatGPT at $20 a month. So you can upload a big, huge table of data, and it actually does the research, and it's quite an amazing process working with that. Exactly. But the temptation can be, let me see what I can learn about my donors. It's like, no, so think about personal information, any kind of identifying information or information that's proprietary in any way, a strategic plan, intellectual property. So think about those things before putting them into your prompt.
Right.
ChatGPT data analysis, fantastic for publicly available data sets. Those monstrous data sets you can like pull from government websites. Now you have a tool to analyze that. But wow, that's public data.
Exactly.
Okay. Personal information, be very mindful. And that's definitely an area that you want to, and we've worked with people around shaping policies to make sure that does not happen.
So that's such a critical step here. And this is the whole piece of the puzzle that I think nonprofits are lacking, which is the AI policy. And I know that, RoundTable Technology, you have a free AI policy template. It's at roundtabletechnology.com/AI policy. I will link to all of that in the show notes. But what are some of the essential elements of an AI policy for a nonprofit?
I mean, an AI policy is basically taking an organization through the steps of saying things like, what kinds of tools are okay to use at our organization? What kind of tools are sanctioned, right? You don't want shadow AI. We have this term for shadow IT. It's those old IT systems that crop up and no one knows about them, right? And so
is it like the dark web?
Yeah, or the dark software that's sitting all over everyone's computers. But anyway,
malware.
So, no, it's more shadow IT. It's a term for when we do cybersecurity assessments, we're often looking for, and also data privacy. Okay, are these data systems that people like just started using that are, because they're so easy to kind of get started doing something because it's all on the web and you don't really have to do anything. And then these different systems like, oh, we use Asana over here. Oh, but we use Trello over here. Oh, but stuff like that happens at a lot of nonprofits, right?
Okay.
It happens everywhere, actually, not just nonprofits. But shadow AI would be like, okay, well, so-and-so's kind of quietly using, ChatGPT over there. They paid for it themselves, so they're kind of using their own thing. And they have their Bard. Okay, that's free. And, so you have different people using different things. So agree on what tools will we use in our organization.
Because we would do that for Google. We'd be like, are we using Gmail? Are we using Outlook? Are we using Teams? Yeah.
Yeah. No. So it's very, right. It's very basic. It's like that. What tools will we use? Know that people are using them now because they're so accessible. So you're kind of saying, okay, which ones are okay to use for work stuff here? Okay. Other types of things like, okay, what types of uses? And I want to jump back to that subject later, but what types of uses are we going to say are okay? And I do want to get back to that because that's an important part of readiness. But okay, attribution, how are we on that one? And organizations may vary, right? An AI acceptable use policy, we provide the template, but that very much needs to then be shaped at your organization, right? And usually I actually recommend, yes, someone's got to own getting it through, right? Like any policy, getting it kind of, discussed, agreed upon, et cetera, and then socialized to staff and training, et cetera. So usually that seems to be in the operations realm of things or operations governance type of responsibility. But I say when you sit down to make decisions about this policy, involve stakeholders who are going to be affected because you want people to weigh in. That's when and that's also an important part, I think, of socializing any policy is getting people's input on it, right? So attribution, are we going to attribute, if AI is used to write a first draft of something that then gets very edited, do we attribute that? Are we going to say that we use ChatGPT for this? That's a question for an organization to ask. I'm not saying that there's a right or a wrong response to that. I've heard some people say, well, do you give attribution to like an intern for the, so that, but again, that's organizational culture is more important for that type of thing, right? Define a review process. Okay. Make sure nothing gets out the door or it's against policy to just generate stuff and send it out there or to use tools that might just kind of make that a little more automated and remove the human being from the review process. So define a review process, right? If you're going to define an anonymization process, right? If you're going to use any of these tools for data analysis or to put your own data in them for whatever reason, and know that actually, one thing I just want to pause for a second and say, there are tools coming up, what do we call enterprise level tools? So when you think about Microsoft is coming out with Copilot, which is going to be part of our like Excel, PowerPoint, Word, the whole environment, right? So with enterprise tools, there are more privacy protections. So be aware of that. It's the same privacy protections as your Microsoft 365, right? So they can't just let this stuff go out there, right? You can also toggle settings to turn off, sharing your data in ChatGPT, but I really recommend more having real guidelines about what you can put in there. But there are enterprise tools like Salesforce is using a lot of, like your Salesforce database is different from what we're talking about now about these generative tools.
So I know that on another topic that we wanted to cover, the importance of risk benefit analysis in identifying AI use cases. So how can we, first of all, what is it? And what are some steps we can take to do this?
So earlier I was talking about use cases, like as part of your policy, you might define the types of use cases. Oh, one more thing I want to say about the AI policy before we hop on from that. Okay. Don't try to boil the ocean when you create your AI policy. And like, well, what tools might be out there 6 months from now? To be honest, I can't tell you what's going to be out there 1 month from now. We may all be surprised, right? So make it, rather than trying to get like the all of everything AI policy, make a commitment as part of instituting this policy to have regular review cycles. Absolutely. Because that's the only way it's going to stay current.
This is so similar to social media, having a social media policy. You can't write Facebook, Twitter, oh, it's already out of date because it's called X now. Threads, but there's no way. It's exactly the same premise.
Yeah.
But it's more about what are the overarching like philosophies and principles. And I love what you just said. This is a living, breathing document. This is not sitting on a shelf. This is not sitting in a hard drive. Like you have to review it maybe what do you think? Every month, every 2 months?
I would review it. I would, if I owned this policy, I would definitely definitely take a look at it every month, 2 months. And at the most every quarter to make a commitment to sit down to stakeholders and say, has anything else cropped up that we want to specify in this? And then you re-socialize it. Again, the policy that's just the policy doesn't really get followed. But, training. So getting back to use cases on AI and risk benefit. Okay. So in the early days, actually, when ChatGPT was new and there were fewer of these tools, like way back in March of 2023, actually Harvard Business Review created a really helpful model for kind of trying to figure out which jobs to give to AI tools, right? And so if you think about a 2x2 matrix, right, and divide that into quadrants, right? On the lower axis is risk, right? How risky is it, right? What's the risk if like something gets out there and it's completely wrong? What's the risk of using AI for doing this type of task, right? So a high risk would be, legal cases, right?
Right.
Legal advice,
a lawsuit,
stuff like that. Medical diagnosis, right? Like you and me doing that, all right, any kind of niche area where the information is very specific. All right, so that's risk from low to high. And then the vertical axis is, in the Harvard study, they called it demand, or kind of how much in demand is this type of thing. I think of those as benefit, right? How much benefit can be derived, right? And the types of benefits we're seeing from generative AI tools: productivity, increased outputs, streamlining workflows, kind of optimizing the things we're doing. For example, my niece is starting a business, and last night I helped her out, and this really took like 15 minutes. I used ChatGPT to create 4 marketing personas for this product she's selling, and then also to do a first draft on campaign pitches to each of these 4 customer groups.
Oh, wow.
Right?
It's so helpful to break that ice of that blank document, that blank page.
Oh my God. And like I could have spent the entire evening trying to do that. And like, for example, one of the benefits that this keeps coming up as a benefit, right? So studies are starting to come out now. Like Harvard did one with Boston Consulting Group, and they found that people, I actually have the stat here, AI completed, using generative tools, completed 12.2% more tasks while doing it 25% 25.1% faster with higher quality results.
Wow.
That's a lot of speed that's a lot of productivity increase when you think about it kind of compounded, right?
Amazing.
Microsoft did another kind of similar study. Now, of course, maybe it's a little biased, but regardless, I could relate to some of these findings, right? So, and this is a big one for me with using generative AI. 58% of the people using it found tasks to be less draining, because that first draft can really drain me. The more creative work can come in the editing. So save me that task, right? Save me the draining tasks so that I can think about the things that require like real focus and creativity and where I can really kind of make a difference, right? So
you can add your unique signature, your unique fingerprint.
Yeah. So it does offer a huge amount in terms of productivity. And this means a lot to nonprofits and nonprofit staff who, we can be drained by having to do so many things all the time and people needing to, juggle lots of things. So what kinds of tasks can this help you with? And so again, putting these things, getting back to that matrix where one axis was risk and the other one was benefit, right? What are the things that go into the low risk, high benefit quadrant? And starting with those, right? And I'd say, some examples can be some copy editing, some first draft on campaign writing, using it for that like RFP that no one wants to have to write, right?
Okay. Or the grant proposal that has to be 500 characters, but you have 1,000 characters written out.
Expand. Actually, these tools don't count very well. It's like,
right.
What if they're that it's a weird like secret of them because they should, right? Because they're computers, but no, they don't count very well. But you can say condense this, and you can give it a word count, and sometimes it can come pretty close. But I always check it in like Word afterwards. But anyway, I think there are likely a lot of tasks, right? Like a difficult to compose email, like something that you're struggling with trying to write.
That is amazing. I have an example of that. Just a friend of mine was trying to resign from a committee that she was serving on as a volunteer, and she just couldn't resign and she was struggling. And I said, look, just ask ChatGPT, say the tone that you want it to be in, give a couple specifics, and it will at least get you that draft. And then you can regenerate it. You can say, make it more friendly or make it more professional or make it this, make it that. It's so helpful because that's emotional strain as well. That's just stress that you don't need to have.
Yeah, no, that stuff is taxing. And so, so as an organization, when working on your policy or identifying those use cases, what are the types of things where there's a lot of opportunity to check, right? And to review, where people who are in the know will be reviewing and so have a second set of eyes on this. So it's something you need, but it doesn't present a lot of risk. And I think starting out with those kinds of use cases, is good. The tools are only going to continue to grow and expand, right? Ethan Malik, who is actually, I think, one of the best writers about AI, if we're trying to figure out how to put it in the workplace, and also give you a link to his Substack. He says the AI we're using today is the worst AI we're ever going to use.
Oh, wow.
So,
because it'll be even better tomorrow.
It's getting human reinforcement learning, right? So so the AI keeps getting better. So think about those tasks that present minimal risk. Think about how you're going to define guidelines, guardrails for how you're going to use this in your organization through your policy. How would you roll it out? What kind of training would you provide? And we've been doing a lot of training around AI. And one of the things we emphasize a lot is there is no perfect class out there. Like, how do I learn to interact with AI better?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. Practice.
Mm-hmm.
And practice on things that aren't as high risk. Again, you talked about your friend writing that email and how you can iterate with AI. No,
Mm-hmm.
write it a little bit more, make it a little bit more friendly. No, also emphasize this. You can keep going back and forth with it. It can be kind of a writing partner, if you will.
Yes.
But
like
that's
an
how you
intern
practice.
would be. You have to train.
Yeah.
You have to train an intern or an assistant or anyone. You can't just expect them to have a great first draft the first time if they've never worked with you before.
And you have to train. And for me, I've had to train myself
Right.
on how to work with these different interns, and they do different flavors, right? ChatGPT, Bard, Bing Chat, Claude, like they have different types of prompt styles tend to work a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing they're great for, by the way, just have to throw this one in for low risk. Mostly can be low risk. If you've ever been given an onerous report that doesn't have a lot of private information, right? A public report, right? Something that's out there for the world to see. And it's like, you need to read and summarize that. Just get a summary of it for yourself. It's really good for them. So
I love it. Well, this has really been really fascinating. Any last thoughts before we talk about where people can reach you, learn more about RoundTable Technology?
I encourage people to try. Remember, it's important that we have more human-centered people looking at this stuff and getting comfortable with it, right? That's a bottom line. Mm-hmm. And it's not going anywhere. So the best thing to do is to kind of think about, how are we going to become ready as an organization? And how are we going to responsibly?
How are we going to responsibly roll this out with optimism?
With optimism.
Yes. Love it. Thank you so much. Oh, Kim, thank you so much. And for everyone listening, go to roundtabletechnology.com/best-ever to sign up for and it's called the best free 1-hour cybersecurity awareness training ever, the 2024 edition. And you can also just go to roundtabletechnology.com and follow Roundtable Technology on all the socials to get more information, to get more of this great free RoundTable Technology. Thank you so much for being here today, sharing this wealth of information with us. Thank you.
You're so welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Well, hey there. I wanted to say thank you for tuning into my show and for listening all the way to the end. If you really enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, and you'll get new episodes downloaded as soon as they come out. I would love if you left me a rating or a review, because this tells other people that my podcast is worth listening to. And then me and my guests can reach even more earbuds and create even more impact. So that's pretty much it. I'll be back soon with a brand new episode. But until then, you can find me on Instagram at JuliaCampbell77. Keep changing the world, you nonprofit unicorn.